Let's just do the damn thing. We're going to talk about Star Wars. If you couldn't tell from the background, we're going to talk about Game of Thrones. And we're going to talk a little sports. And that's pretty much what you can expect from me for the most part on this channel. I am a sports radio producer, but I'm also a massive Star Wars nerd. I'm a huge Game of Thrones nerd. And so you get a little bit of everything here on the channel. But it has been a while since we've done a show, a podcast, whatever you want to call it. Essentially what I've been up to is I've been producing a sports radio show, covering games, and things have been very, very hectic. And that is one thing also that I want to do on this show is kind of give you a peek behind the curtain of just, I guess, the journey of being a sports radio producer, kind of being in that world. If you've followed, and what few of you have followed kind of my videos up to this point when I've put them out, like I've gradually been getting to this point. I've always kind of been into sports and did an internship in sports radio and did a few other little sports shows here and there. That's PA announcing and sports broadcasting for baseball. And that's now we've gotten to this point where I'm producing full-time a sports radio show, The Drive with Josh Graham. It is the sports radio show in the triad of North Carolina. That's where I'm from. The High Point, Greensboro, Winston-Salem, Burlington area. That's the triad. I don't know. Is Burlington the triad? I think Burlington's the triad. But before we get going here, first of all, I want to make sure my mic is operating right, because, okay, looks like we're good. Yeah, I don't want to get 30 minutes into this podcast, even though I'm probably not even going to be doing this for 30 minutes, because I'm actually going to hop on my Twitch channel and I'm going to stream some video games tonight too. I'm going to do a little bit of everything tonight. But yeah, I've gotten like 30 minutes into a podcast before, only to realize that my mic was muted the whole time. So that was fun, but pleasure to have you in. And let's get to it here. So because it's been kind of a while since I've done this, I kind of wanted to react to a few things, because I believe I know the last podcast I did was me kind of preparing and kind of talking with you guys about the Star Wars show that was about to drop, which was Obi-Wan Kenobi. And now that was months ago. I mean, that came out in May. So again, it's been a while. So Kenobi's come out and been done for a while now. Also, again, massive Game of Thrones fan, House of the Dragon has also come and gone. And we've also got some other Game of Thrones news to kind of chop up about. I'm going to get into that as well. So my reaction to the Kenobi show. You know what? Did it completely satisfy me? No. If you don't know, which, again, because I have very few subscribers, 19 to be exact at this very moment, I'm Episode 3, Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. That is my favorite Star Wars movie. It's the one I grew up watching. Let me stop. I watched all of them. I'll knock my computer over. I watched all the Star Wars movies over and over and over growing up, but Episode 3, that was the one that, I don't know. Like, I literally have my hair. My hair's also a lot longer than the last time you saw me. I grow my hair out because of Anakin, because I remember as a kid, my mom always made me get a short haircut. And so during the time where I was initially watching Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, back in 2005, which would have me in third grade when Revenge of the Sith came out, and 4th, 5th grade, still obsessed with it. My mom would never allow me to grow my hair out like Anakin, so here we are. So that was always my favorite. So I was really, really highly anticipating Kenobi because, as Star Wars fans know, Kenobi was essentially Revenge of the Sith Part 2. Essentially, it took place 10 years after Episode 3, and it really just kind of picked up and kind of showed where Anakin was at, or Vader now, and it just kind of connected the time between Episode 3 and Episode 4 for those characters. And I've always said that's probably the part of Star Wars that I'm most fascinated about, is the period of time between Episode 3 and Episode 4. I was always kind of fascinated about, all right, especially the time like immediately following Revenge of the Sith, like Anakin's got to deal with, I'm stuck in this suit now. Padme's gone. I've burned down the entire Jedi Order, essentially. My best friend, Kenobi, we just duked it out. I lost. And that's no more. And, now I'm with Palpatine. And, he's kind of been my guy outside of Kenobi this whole time, ever since, he was discovered by Qui-Gon and they brought him to become a Jedi. Palpatine was kind of his other mentor besides Kenobi. And so now it's like, I always wondered what Vader's thoughts were about the Emperor after everything went down. Once Padme was gone and kind of the whole plot of, saving her from death, because that was the main reason he bought in and just went over the edge. I know kind of from what I've read in comics and other things, I feel like Vader kind of had a resentment towards Palpatine a little bit. I got to kind of go more in depth about how he kind of felt about Palpatine after that. But so anyway, I was always fascinated about that period of time right after Episode 3, mainly for Vader, just to kind of see, like, I was always curious, like, what he was going through behind closed doors, because it wasn't good. Like, it wasn't good. So, but anyway, Kenobi was 10 years following Revenge of the Sith, and I really enjoyed it. Was I completely satisfied? No, but I did really enjoy it. I was not expecting them to dive as far into Kenobi and Leia's relationship as they did, which I guess when you kind of look back, you could see that coming, because I don't even remember if Leia was shown in a trailer for Kenobi. I don't know that she was. I could be wrong about that. Let me know. By the way, also, I know nobody's watching this right now, but if you do stumble across this video, 1, hello. 2, I love comments. I really love comments. I'm not one of these people that, I've got comments rolling down, the side of the feed here, and I'm just going to keep going and not even pay attention to them. Like, I want to interact with you guys a lot, because that's how we're going to build this community up. And so please drop comments once I do have people in here watching this, and we will engage live on air. And that's going to be the interesting thing about this particular show. As I've said in the past on this show, when I've done it, this is kind of a live, well, not kind of, it is live, but it's a live format to engage on air, maybe even some Q&A type stuff as we get further down the road. In fact, what I might start doing, since I don't have any questions right now because nobody's watching this right now, what I might do is like make up questions or like read comments of other people's content and take questions and like answer them. So that could be fun, something maybe to get into. And then that maybe will build this thing up. So I digress. But no, I did not expect them to go into Leia and Kenobi's relationship the way they did. Now, there is a large portion of the Star Wars fandom that will literally, and I get it because, the sequel trilogy, The Last Jedi, and somewhat Episode 9 to be specific. I actually think people probably, even the people that really dislike the sequels, I feel like most people did like The Force Awakens. I feel like most will agree that was the best of the bunch. But that just left such a sour taste. And we'll get to Game of Thrones here in a minute, kind of how season 7 and 8 did for a lot of people on that. The sequel trilogy did the same thing. It left a really sour taste in people's mouths, and to the point where, like, Star Wars fans are already really hard to please. And after the sequel trilogy and some of the other projects that have taken place alongside and after the sequel trilogy, it's left such a taste in people's mouths that I feel like Star Wars fans, for the most part, are even harder to please. Like, the slightest little thing, so, yeah. A lot of people had issue with how much focus they put on Kenobi and Leia. I didn't. I thought it was really interesting because we've never seen that before. We've never seen, we've seen Ben Kenobi and Luke interact in that relationship a little bit in episode 4, but we never saw, because remember, in episode 4, Leia literally sent the hologram, help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope. Now we know, what that relationship was kind of based off of. So I actually thought it was really interesting. And God, don't even get me started on Reva. I know a lot of people did not like Reva's character. Was she really annoying? Yes. Was she really unhinged and just kind of just, I don't even know how to describe her character. Very annoying, unhinged, and just kind of all over the place as far as just, I don't know, Reva. A lot of people did not like the focus that was put on Reva. A lot of people did not like the fact that Reva got stabbed in the gut as a youngling, spoiler alert, and then stabbed in the gut again as the Grand Inquisitor by Anakin as a youngling and Vader. I guess Vader as a youngling too, but you get my point. And she lived, and then proceeds to go to Tatooine and try and get Luke, and then doesn't, and then Obi-Wan says, "Yeah, you can go now." Yeah. A lot of people didn't like that. I will say, even though she was annoying, that was how the character was written to be. That's one thing I wish people would do more of, is when they're annoyed by a character, maybe they were written to be that way. So it's working. Whatever it is, the character was designed to make you feel it's working. So she was written to be annoying and kind of just all over the place, and I'm trying to figure out a good word to describe her besides annoying. She wants to get her way. That's the best way to put it. She's one of those, she's going to get her way and just don't get the fuck in her way. And kind of has an attitude problem, clearly. But that's my description of Reva, for whatever that's worth. But I don't know. The ending of Reva was kind of, I don't know how she survived the stab to the gut. And I get the reaction to that because, one of our favorite characters of all time, Qui-Gon, died the same way. So it's how does he live, but she can take it twice and got it? So, kind of weird. But anyway, the main thing I liked about Kenobi was, of course, and is the thing I wanted the most going into it, was to see Hayden Christensen either as Vader or as Anakin in a Clone Wars prequel flashback. That's what I wanted any way I could get it going into this. And, I remember that first scene. I believe it was episode 3 of the series. When we saw that opening scene of Vader getting suited up and, the helmet comes down and you see Hayden Christensen for the first time again. It was just goosebumps, just absolute goosebumps. Because again, and most of you Hayden Christensen, Anakin fanboys out there will attest to this. Like, if he's your favorite or one of your favorites, it's just, we love that guy. We love him. We love what he brought to the character. We love how he portrayed that character. And the fact that he was coming back after 20 years to reprise that role, and he will in Ahsoka too. I actually read some things on that earlier today that could happen. We'll get into that in another episode. To be able to see him again was just, it was nostalgic. It gave me goosebumps, and it just was so cool. Like that. That's all I wanted, was just to further explore his character and Hayden playing that character. And so seeing that suit up sequence was just so cool, so badass. And then the first time we saw him as Anakin, even though I think it was dark side Anakin, but Anakin nonetheless, in not, burned shape. So he essentially looked like how he looked in episode 3 when he was hooded on Mustafar, when he was like looking over the landscape there after he'd killed all the separatists and Newt Gunray and all that, and just kind of reflecting on everything. He kind of had that because he was in the same stance, like with his arm crossed, hood up. When Kenobi and Leia arrived on the planet, I can't remember the planet's name, but it was the one where Kenobi and Vader faced off for the first time. When Kenobi looked over and he was hallucinating, he was seeing things, and he saw Anakin off in the distance, and Anakin turns around and looks at him. Oh my God, it was so cool. And a lot of people had issue with the music of this show because it wasn't Star Warsy enough. I didn't get that vibe. Was it like traditional Star Wars music? No. But I also didn't think the music they went with was an issue. Especially, and a lot of people specifically said that in that third episode, like when the ship is landing on that planet, whatever the music was, like, I thought it was great. Like, I loved the vibes of that music. So I don't know what the issue was there, but everybody's entitled to their opinion. I get it. That's what makes this stuff fun. We've all got different angles the way we see that, and it's all great. And we can discuss and learn things, and I like that. So seeing Anakin for the first time is really cool. But to kind of get back to what I was talking about, that's one thing you're going to learn about me, and it's something that I think is a gift, but I'm trying to get better at doing it, is I tend to get not sidetracked, but I'm very improv, and I'm very like, I'll be talking about one thing, and then I'll kind of get on a side street and start going off on something else, and then I'll eventually come back to the original point, and then I'll get off on something else, and then take a back road, and then get back on the main thing again. It's kind of it's just the way I communicate. It's something that I'm trying to work on. Kind of staying on topic, staying on point a little bit better. Like, I'm not going to stop going off script a little bit just because that's how I communicate. And I think that's how I communicate best. But anyway, but I wanted those Anakin flashbacks and Vader flashbacks from episode 3. And as you all know, the 5th and 6th episodes of the show was when we got that. There was the opening scene of Anakin from Attack of the Clones looking out the window at Coruscant, and it was just so nostalgic. And then to see Obi-Wan come in dressed, they were both dressed as if they were in Attack of the Clones. I thought Anakin's Padawan ponytail was a little too long, a little too cosplay looking. Like, it didn't look, if that makes sense, like it almost looked like a cosplay prop clipped on the back of his head. Like, it didn't look like a real little ponytail like it did in Attack of the Clones. I think they could have done that a little bit better. But kind of seeing those flashbacks to Anakin and Obi-Wan training, like train dueling throughout that whole story of Obi-Wan coming to Jabim and trying to find, or I'm sorry, Anakin or Vader coming to Jabim trying to find Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan talking about how Vader lacks the patience, and they're showing the flashback of the fight. Oh, I just knocked over my microphone. Showing the flashbacks of the fight. Anakin from Attack of the Clones not having the patience, and Obi-Wan eventually beats him, and the episode essentially ends with Vader not having the patience, and he falls for the decoy ship and pulls it down, which was a badass scene. And then the real ship flies away, and then Reva basically tries to go on a suicide mission and loses to Vader, which I really enjoyed that fight. Like, that was the comic book badass Vader that I'm sure many of you really wanted to see in this. Kind of like the hallway scene in Rogue One. Because Vader, like, in the comic books, is just such a badass. He's such a force that we really don't get to see in the original trilogy. And so I feel like we've gotten to see a little bit of a taste of that in the Kenobi show, and obviously the hallway scene in Rogue One. But and then there's the final duel between Obi-Wan and Vader, and the best part, of course, is when Obi-Wan cuts through the helmet. And I always thought it was cool, and I've heard a bunch of people make this comparison. Ahsoka in their duel in Rebels took out one side. I think it was the right. Obi-Wan in the duel in Kenobi took out the left side to see his face. But Luke was the only one who was able to completely remove his helmet in Return of the Jedi, of course, when he turns back to Anakin right before he dies. So I thought that was kind of cool. A lot of people have made that comparison. But seeing and hearing, by the way, seeing Hayden Christensen when the helmet's cut and then hearing his voice blended in with the Darth Vader robotic voice, gave me chills. It gave me chills to hear that kind of go back and forth, and then the lighting of the blue on Anakin's face when he's kind of talking about, I'm not your failure. You didn't kill Anakin Skywalker. I did. And then it switches from the blue of Obi-Wan's saber on his face to the red of his saber right before he says, and I will destroy you, or whatever the exact line he said. Just that whole sequence was really cool. And, and then, of course, seeing Ian McDermott again as Palpatine at the end, and then finally hearing the Darth Vader theme in the last shot of Darth Vader on his castle. So, overall, really enjoyed the show. Did it meet my absolute expectations? No, because I wish we would have gotten more of Anakin. I wish we would have got more flashbacks. But I really did enjoy the show, and I didn't have an issue with the music. I didn't have an issue with how deeply they explored Obi-Wan and Leia's relationship. Didn't have a problem with that at all. And even though Reva was annoying, because she was written to be annoying, like, I didn't have a big issue with her character outside of the fact, how the hell did you live? Like, excuse me. How the hell did you survive, one, a stab to the gut by Anakin as a youngling, and then you did it again when he stabbed you as Vader? How do you do that? Can somebody teach me how to do that? Anyway, let's move to House of the Dragon. I'm going to be very brief on this just because I feel like I rambled a lot on Kenobi. Again, haven't done a podcast in a long time, so I'm kind of getting back into the loop of things, and we'll smooth this thing out. Bear with me a little bit. But it is a lot of fun doing this again. So, House of the Dragon, man, it was so cool. That was one thing I was really excited about for this year specifically, as it's already come and gone, which is crazy to me, is we were getting Kenobi. which was an extension of Star Wars Episode 3, my favorite Star Wars movie. And we were also returning to Westeros in House of the Dragon, my favorite show. I'm a massive Star Wars nerd, and I am a massive Game of Thrones nerd. I'm not as much of a Game of Thrones nerd, quite to the scale of Star Wars, but it's right under it. So, I don't want to keep coughing this whole damn time. But no, like, I don't have this major analysis of House of the Dragon, really. Outside of the fact that it was so cool, just, again, to see Westeros again, to see the Red Keep, to see the inside of the Red Keep, to see the courtyard where, you know, in Game of Thrones, you know, that was kind of where the small council chamber was. That's where Cersei painted the map of Westeros on the floor of the courtyard. So it was really cool to see that again. It was cool to see the dragon pit, because remember in season 7, you know, when they bring the White to King's Landing to show Cersei what the hell's coming out of the north and trying to, you know, get together on that. And then, of course, the last episode of Game of Thrones where Tyrion comes before them and talks about there's nothing in the world better than a great story. And they King Bran. The Dragon Pit ruins. It was cool to see the actual Dragon Pit at its finest, you know, when it was like an actual structure. And, you know, ultimately what this show was is like, showing the Targaryens like at their height. I would assume that was their height, you know, because we only saw Daenerys like in Viserys in season 1 of Game of Thrones, but we only saw like a small taste of the Targaryen power really in Game of Thrones, and this was like kind of showing you it at its greatest, at its peak. And it was cool to kind of see that. And it was cool to see how like they had dragon sculptures and statues around King's Landing. And, you know, whereas before we're used to seeing like Lannister lions and Baratheon deer, even though I think they call it stags is what they call it in the show. The music, hearing the Targaryen theme for the first time again, when Rhaenyra is flying in on Syrax in that opening scene, was super cool. And it's like, well, the last time we saw that shot, Daenerys was fucking up the Red Keep, and now everything's good. And just like the fact that, and just to kind of show and further immerse you into the fact that this is just normal life, because the Targaryens run this. It's like, you got dragons flying overhead and people walking around King's Landing. They don't even blink an eye. As opposed to in Game of Thrones, everybody's like looking up and, you know, freaking out like, oh shit. Like, so like I said, don't have a huge analysis yet on House of the Dragon outside of the fact that it was really cool to kind of go back to Westeros, see some of the structures and see like some of the houses again, like Lannister, which, you know, Lannister isn't anything compared to what it was in Game of Thrones, obviously, what it will become. Because again, House of Dragons is about 200 years before the events of Game of Thrones. And seeing Stark in the first episode when they're all bending the knee to Rhaenyra. Daemon is an absolute badass. Aemond is also an absolute badass and really cool looking. He kind of looks like an anime character come to life, essentially. So really excited. And of course, the way the season ended with Lucerys, I think that, yeah, Lucerys getting eaten by Vhagar. I think that was that dragon's name. That was the last shot was something, because that happens, and then you see Daemon, you know, kind of come, and it's implied like he's telling Rhaenyra. We don't hear it because music's playing, but we assume he's telling and he is telling Rhaenyra what has happened. And when she turns around and you see that look on her face, it's the same look that Daenerys had as she was walking towards and then past the camera after Missandei got beheaded at the gates of King's Landing. It was that same look. And I remember thinking, I've seen that look before. That's the look right before a Targaryen fucks shit up. That's when the dragon comes out. So season 2 is going to be awesome. I believe they're set to start filming that sometime this early on in this coming year. Also, we got more Game of Thrones coming. There is going to be, and those of you that follow House of the Dragon really closely already know this. I'm not breaking any news here. There is going to be a Jon Snow spinoff. And as much as I love House of the Dragon, oh, I'm so ready for this Jon Snow spinoff. I'm so ready for it. I don't know when we're going to get it. It's probably going to be a couple years from now because they haven't even started filming it yet. But it's kind of, they announced that a couple months ago, and it's kind of started to resurface again because they just had some Game of Thrones convention this past week, and a lot of the House of the Dragon cast was there. Paddy Considine, who played Viserys, was there. And Kit Harington was also there. Not a coincidence. I mean, yes, he's a Game of Thrones character, but Emilia Clarke wasn't there. Like, and all the other, like a lot of the other Game of Thrones characters weren't there. That made me nothing, but like he was there because like he's going to be coming back, and he's going to be coming back to the show. And he was kind of talking about this, and I've got his exact comments pulled up here, so I don't missay something. But one, it was just really cool to hear Kit Harington talking storyline of Jon Snow again, because he was one of my favorite characters on Game of Thrones. In fact, he was probably my favorite character on Game of Thrones. I really like Jaime too, and I like Daenerys. So those are probably my top 3. Night King's pretty badass too, but so anyway, it was really kind of cool to hear him talking about the Game of Thrones storyline again, outside of just, oh, it was cool to film. Like, he was like getting in depth about the story, and it just is really cool to hear that. And it just kind of, not to the degree, but similar as how I was so excited to see Hayden Christensen come back as Anakin and further explore that character and further explore that time of Revenge of the Sith, which is my favorite. It was so cool hearing Kit Harington and seeing that he's going to be coming back, and we're going to see him again as Jon Snow to further explore that story. And he was talking about this, and essentially what he was saying here, I've got his actual comments here. Let's see here. He was essentially kind of talking about how Jon Snow, as he was in the cell after he killed Daenerys, and the throne was melted and burned by Drogon, and Drogon flew away with Daenerys' body. He was talking about how he thought he was going to get beheaded. Like, as he was in the dungeon there, he thought he was going to get beheaded. And according to Kit Harington, which there is no better source to learn and know these things about the character than the one who played him, and the one who clearly has been having meetings already with writers and directors and producers on this show, because he wouldn't be going this detailed and in-depth that he did about it if he wasn't already talking to somebody about it. So that's another piece of this that really excites me. He thought he was going to get beheaded. He wanted to get beheaded because he just was over it, essentially. And he was just kind of talking about how, like, Jon has a lot on his mind. And the fact that he gets sent to the wall is honestly, I'm trying to remember if he said it was like the best case scenario for him, or I'm trying to remember exactly how Kit Harington framed how John felt about going back to the wall. Like I remember he kind of mentioned like he thought he was going to get beheaded, so to go back to the wall, even though like many people would see that as like not great, like it's better than being beheaded. And also, but even though it is the best case scenario, like he's literally going to the wall to spend the rest of his life, at least that we know of. We'll find out in the show if that's the case, which is again, that's why I'm so excited to find this out. He's gonna like imagine like all the things that were on his mind as you're literally going to just this very bleak and just at the edge of the world place to live out the rest of your days in exile, essentially. You've got, and Kit went into this, like and this is the exact quote. At the end of the show, when we find him in that cell, he's preparing to be beheaded, and he wants to be. And let's see here. And he was just saying, like, he's done. He's over it. And the fact that he gets to go to the wall is so I was right on this. He said it was the greatest gift and the greatest curse. It's the greatest gift because you get to live and you're going to the wall to live. You don't get beheaded. But it's the greatest curse because you've got all this shit on your mind. He continues. He's got to go back up to the place with all of this history and live out his life thinking about how he killed Danny. And to hear Kit Harington say Danny again was just, I really enjoyed that. And live out his life thinking about Egret dying in his arms, and live out his life thinking about how he hung Ollie, and live out his life thinking about all of this trauma, and that's interesting. And Harington concluded, he's not okay. So, and what this kind of reminded me of is Kenobi. Like how Ewan McGregor basically described we were going to see Kenobi in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show after, the Jedi Order's fallen. He's literally trained dust. He's trained Darth Vader, and now that's happening. And so he blames himself for pretty much all of this stuff. And so you see a very beat down and just uninspired and faithless Obi-Wan Kenobi. And so that's kind of what I thought about, oddly enough, when Kit Harington was describing the state that we will see Jon Snow in when we see him in the spinoff. And so it is going to be really cool. And it made me think, like, I wonder if, like, nothing's confirmed yet, but, like, I wonder if I wonder if we're going to see flashbacks. Like, I get Jon and Daenerys, like, weren't together all that long, but, like, I wonder if we will see potentially flashbacks of him and Daenerys, or him thinking about Daenerys, and maybe we will get a cameo from Emilia Clarke. That would be really cool. I'm also wondering if they're going to use this show to potentially right the wrong. I had no problem with season 7 and 8. I actually really liked season 8 of Game of Thrones. I'm wondering, but if you are plugged in, a vast majority of the fans did not like season 7 or 8, specifically season 8. They didn't. It's kind of like how The Last Jedi and the sequel trilogy split the Star Wars fandom. Season 8 split. I wouldn't even say split. I would say the majority of Game of Thrones did not like the finale. Like, even I've heard, like, Maisie Williams was talking about how, So, yeah, I'm wondering if they're going to use this show to kind of right the wrong of season 8, and maybe redo or rearrange some things. So that will be interesting, but it was just kind of cool to hear Kit Harington talking very much in detail and in depth about what Jon Snow's going through. Like I watch a lot of behind the scenes stuff when it comes to Star Wars and Game of Thrones, and I listen to and watch a lot of interviews of the actors that played the characters. And I've not really heard Jon talking this in depth about what Jon was going through there in season 8 and kind of what he's dealing with as he's going to the wall. So to me, again, that tells me he's been talking to writers, he's been talking to producers and directors, and Like they've been kind of filling him in on what's going on, and they've already started talking about things. And so it's just going to be really cool to see that. Now, let's transition to some sports, because I spent 20 minutes ranting about Kenobi, and I spent 20 minutes ranting about Game of Thrones. Let's also move to some sports, because that's another thing I really enjoy, and I'm sure many of you do too. I am a Carolina Panthers fan. I live here in North Carolina. I'm a Carolina Panther fan. I'm a Charlotte Hornet fan. I'm a UNC Tar Heel fan, and I'm a Carolina Hurricanes hockey fan. I'm sorry I keep coughing. I'm talking and talking and talking here, and my water is empty. So there's that. So if you follow NFL or the Panthers at all, you're aware that, things have not been going, or were not going so great for them up to this point. A couple of really, really bad seasons under Matt Rule. The quarterback position has been absolutely butchered by the Panthers. They've had like 5 different quarterbacks in the last 3 years, I think, between Teddy Bridgewater, Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, Cam Newton a second time, and I feel like there's one I'm forgetting. They drafted Matt Corral this year, which I didn't have a problem with that, but they drafted him. And what still to this day, and we'll see what type of quarterback they can get in the draft, and we'll get to this point here in just a minute, but the fact that they had Justin Fields sitting right there, they had him right there in their laps, and they passed and they took J.C. Horn. I love J.C. Horn. I think he's a really good corner, but you didn't need another corner. You already had Jeremy Chin. You ended up bringing in, what's that guy's name? I'm forgetting. Stephon Gilmore, when Jeremy Chin got hurt last year, so you could have just brought him in anyway and then had Chin and Gilmore. So you didn't need a corner. You desperately needed a quarterback. And you had Justin Fields and Mac Jones sitting right there in your lap with the 8th overall pick in that 2020 draft, I believe it was, or 2021, whichever. And you passed. Really? Like, and to see what Justin Fields is doing this year, it's just like, ugh. Like, why? Like, it's just the quarterback position. And you know what? The Panthers have paid the price for it up to this point. Now, with that said, Sam Darnold, since he's come back the last couple of games, has really looked better. That's also because the Panthers have really invested and put money and resources over this last offseason in their offensive line, which was the weakest part outside of the quarterback, the weakest part of their team for as long as I can remember. Like the year the Panthers went to the Super Bowl in 2015 and went 15-1, the Cam MVP year, they had one of the worst offensive lines in the league. Maybe the second, maybe even the worst. So that's how long it had been a problem. But they drafted Ike Ekwonu this year. They got Taylor Moton. Bradley Bozeman is playing really good right now. So they really ramped up the offensive line, and go figure, Sam Darnold's playing much better behind, some protection. So I like that. Like Darnold. He's a great human being, by the way. But you got to get a quarterback. You've got to get a franchise quarterback, which they do not currently have. Love Sam Darnold. He's not a franchise guy to lead you into the future. Good bridge quarterback to kind of get you to that franchise guy and kind of hold you down not in the long term, hold you down in the meantime, but he's not the franchise guy. Bryce Young could be. CJ Stroud could be. And even though I'm kind of rolling my eyes, Will Levis might be. I don't know. The problem is, and so to kind of progress to where the Panthers currently are, so they fire Matt Rule, and They trade away Christian McCaffrey. They trade away Robbie Anderson after that whole ordeal on the sideline. And it pretty much seemed like, all right, Panthers are tanking, as they should, by the way. Like, there's some out there that might say that tanking doesn't work quite the same in the NFL as it does in basketball. And that's true to a point because, there's so many more positions like in football than there is in basketball. And my computer battery die? No. Like there's so many more positions in football that you have to take care of. And, that some people need a quarterback, some don't. So you could have 5, 6, 7, 8 teams in the top 10 picks, like that don't, which is unlikely. A few of those are going to need quarterbacks, but like not all those teams need quarterbacks. So if the Panthers just could have been in the top 5, 6, 7's pushing it, they still could probably get at worst Will Levis from Kentucky. The problem is they currently sit at 9 because, to get back to the point I was just making, a lot of people thought the Panthers were in tank mode when Matt Rule was fired, McCaffrey was traded, Robbie Anderson was traded. It's like, well, they're not going to win games. Like that's a great way to tank. It's like you trade away all your best players so you don't have to sit there and try and lose on purpose. You just don't have good enough players to win. You might put up a good fight, but you just don't win. So it's not My camera battery totally died on you guys. Sorry about that. But no, you trade away McCaffrey and other good players. It's like you just don't have good enough players to win. So it's not like you're going out there losing on purpose. You just don't have good enough players to win. Well, Steve Wilks, who is a Charlotte native, he went to App State, and has been with the Panthers. I don't know if he's been with them since and before the 2015 Super Bowl team, but he was he owned the coaching staff of that 2015 Super Bowl team. So he's seen the Panthers at their height that they've up to this point that they've had. And he was a part of that, which feels good to have him as the interim head coach. I tell you what, man, and doing what I do for a living, producing sports radio where we get to talk and be around these guys at the games and cover them and, be around them at the post-game press conferences and then interviews. We had Steve Wilks on our show literally a week ago. And I tell you what, man, at first when Matt Rule was fired and he was named interim, didn't know anything about him really, I was like, there's no way he's like, whatever. He's just filling space. I was adamant about wanting to get Sean Payton. Still would like to get Sean Payton. Don't get me wrong. But, man, I tell you what, I'm so in on Steve Wilks because the Panthers have messed around and won a handful of games. They just won their first game on the road. Like, they're winning most of their home games now. They won very few under Matt Rule in 2.5 years or 2 years or 2 years and 5 games, I think, specifically. Excuse me. Steve Wilks, he's a very no BS type of guy. He's got a little bit of a tough guy personality to him. No bullshit. And those players are so bought into him in the locker room, and they are playing for him. And that is why they're winning games. They're playing for him to get the job. And I got to tell you, as much as I would love to have Sean Payton coach that team, like, Sean Payton's probably not going to coach that team, because I think Steve Wilkes is probably all but a lock to get this job. And if the Panthers go out and beat the Steelers on Sunday, a team in which the owner of the Panthers, David Tepper, was a minority stakeholder in at one point, he grew up a Steelers fan. This is the first time the Panthers have played the Steelers, I believe, since Tepper became the owner. Oh, I'm sorry, no. This is the first time in a while that the Panthers have played the Steelers. I don't know how long it's been. Because remember, actually, I think the last time the Panthers played the Steelers was the infamous TJ Watt knocking the crap out of Cam Newton game, and that was the beginning of the end for the Ron Rivera era and Cam Newton, essentially. And so bad memories there. I think that's the last time the Panthers played the Steelers. And I tell you what, if the Panthers go out and beat the Steelers in Charlotte, a team which David Tepper grew up rooting for and was once a minority stakeholder in, that's it. That's it. Steve Wilkes is the guy. And I think he is already. Because, like, if your players, and this is the thing, if your players are if you're an interim head coach, hell, if you're not an interim, like whatever type of coach you are, if your players are so bought into you that they are literally playing for you and winning games for you, like for the sake of you, like that is it. Like, that is what every coach should strive for, is for players to fight for him and to, like, want to rally and win games behind him. That is like the epitome of what every coach should aspire for, because that is a winning formula. Especially, you got to have some talent in there, which the Panthers, all they need is the quarterback now. Because I think Deontay Foreman, along with Chuba Hubbard, pretty nice, especially behind this much improved offensive line. The defense, really good for the Panthers. Top 5 in the league, I think. And they got DJ Moore. They got Shi Smith. Like, they got weapons. They'll get more probably. You just need the quarterback. Now, the problem is, as of today, they would draft 9th, I think. I think that's right. The 49ers just beat the Seahawks tonight. I don't know if that impacts the draft order at all, at least for the Panthers. But as of today, they draft 9th. That's a little iffy if you're trying to get CJ Stroud or Bryce Young. That would be my choice out of Alabama. And even if you want to try and get Will Levis, like, I don't know if he's going to be there. Because you've got the Lions in front of you. I actually, now that I think about it, I think the Seahawks are in front of you somewhere because they got somebody else's pick in a trade at some point. They may take a quarterback, even though Geno Smith has been great this year. Like, they might not view him as the long term. They might want to go ahead and draft a CJ Stroud or a Bryce Young while they can. And I forget, the Texans, they're going to draft a quarterback, I'm sure. Like, I just named 3 teams already that could likely take a quarterback. Panthers are a little bit further behind them. So, it's tough because I was so – like, I remember when the Panthers got that first win. I don't remember who they played, but when they got that first win, after Matt Rule was fired and Steve Wilkes had come in as interim head coach, I remember being so salty about that. Because, and I tweeted this, so I own it. I felt, okay, like, enjoy your couple little moral victories. Meanwhile, as a team that's gotten the quarterback position wrong and goofed on it for the last 3 years, you're going to screw yourself out of a potentially franchise-changing quarterback in a CJ Stroud or a Bryce Young. And you might even screw yourself out of a Will Levis for whatever that's worth. I don't know yet. That's how I felt about that at the time. Like, okay, congrats on your little moral victory. Meanwhile, you're going to screw yourself out of a good draft spot. Enjoy. I don't quite feel that strongly about it anymore because, and, you know, my radio host that I produce for, you know, he's kind of altered my opinion on this a little bit because, you know, he just kind of more insights like, well, you want to win games and get the coach right. And not only that, but tanking is a little more difficult and a little different in the NFL than in the NBA because, again, it's such a position. There's so many more positions of importance in football than in basketball. In basketball, if you're a hooper, you're a hooper. In football, you got the quarterbacks, you got the defense, you got the running back. Like, there's different needs.